Okay, so we're on the clock.
We had our
so to
fourth
speak.
partner, Matthew Roden, that we're going to try and dial in on the LE conference. Is that possible?
It is, but you're wasting time.
Okay, all right.
So, Hajia, kick off.
Okay. That's okay. We'll move straight into it. Thank you very much. We'll take no more than 10 minutes for this piece and then 5 for questions. So thank you very much for having us here today. Obviously, we've introduced ourselves. As you may have seen in the media, Helius Therapeutics is a startup with a very clear purpose. We exist to help people improve their quality of life through access to world-class medicinal cannabis products. Helius is an exciting, professionally governed company. This year we're actually investing $15 million in a state-of-the-art medicinal-grade cannabis facility to cultivate, research and manufacture medicinal cannabis products right here in New Zealand. And this will be a truly world-class venture right here in this country. We are a group of Kiwi entrepreneurs. We see ourselves as a startup business and a startup industry, of course converting a black market to a regulated, legitimate, taxable economy. Our company has unique IP for more than a dozen product lines and proprietary strains developed through leading-edge medical R&D from North America. We don't just produce nutraceuticals, or we don't just plan to produce nutraceuticals, we also have products that are ready for clinical trials here in New Zealand immediately. So we have quite a head start there. Cannabis medicines made by Helius will meet the highest international standards for quality and consistency. So legislation allowing, and with the resources that we have behind us, we plan to build a global brand capable of taking New Zealand-made medicinal cannabis products to the world stage, bolstering our export economy, providing employment for hundreds of people, and generating millions in tax revenue for the country, we hope, from what could be a billion-dollar industry. So in the short term, Helius is focused on achieving the fundamental objective of this bill, which we believe is to make high-quality, safe medicinal cannabis products accessible to New Zealanders who can benefit from their therapeutic properties. So we know there have been over 23,000 studies on the therapeutic benefits of medicinal cannabis. These, combined with a significant consumer demand shift towards nutraceuticals, has seen cannabis legalised for medicinal purposes now in dozens of countries, and in fact 30 states across the US, as you'll know. Not only has medicinal cannabis proven to work for a variety of conditions such as epilepsy, multiple sclerosis and pain, for example, but for many New Zealanders, it's the only thing that works. As you've heard from many constituents, no doubt, through this process, the reality is medicinal cannabis is actually a mainstream product consumed by mainstream people. In fact, of course, the Ministry of Health's own data says that there are already 235,000 New Zealanders using cannabis regularly for medicinal purposes today in New Zealand. So that is about 1 in 20 New Zealanders, if we look at that particular stat, all of whom are buying unregulated product, or most of whom are buying unregulated product on the black market. So if we imagine the potential for Kiwi companies like ours to offer safe, legal products with precise compounds, accurate dosages, and medical-grade delivery mechanisms like caplets, oils, sprays, and topicals, that is significant. However, we believe for a local producer industry to thrive here in New Zealand, there are 5 priorities that we should address. And in turn, these factors, we believe, are essential for the intent of this bill to be realised, because without a thriving local producer industry, medicinal cannabis products will remain expensive and largely inaccessible due to barriers around export and many other factors, and import, I should say. Now, I'll take you through the priorities we'd like you to consider. These will help ensure our country creates a robust professional medicinal cannabis industry, and New Zealanders benefit from cannabis products that are effective, consistent, and accessible. So the first priority we'd like you to consider is to set high-quality production standards for the local producer industry. We want this industry to be as legitimate and as high quality as possible. So to give New Zealand patients and doctors the utmost confidence that locally produced products are accessible to them, Helius is opting for GMP certification. That stands for Good Manufacturing Process, if you haven't come across before. This is the global gold standard for medical-grade production facilities. And our suggestion is that all cannabis products produced and consumed for medicinal purposes in New Zealand ought to be GMP certified. This does set the bar high, but even if you choose not to mandate GMP for all producers, Helius will still invest in meeting the standard voluntarily, because we believe New Zealand-made products should be benchmarked against the best in the world.
So can I just ask then, is that a requirement in other jurisdictions, the GMP certification?
It hasn't been to date.
But you're anticipating it will be?
Potentially, look, it's pretty hard to say. It's still very much an emerging market globally. But when you do look at Tilray's a good example to speak to on this, because we're all familiar with certain products here in New Zealand. They've converted to GMP, for example, because it's a logical standard, high quality standard.
Certainly, if we did, if export was to be
I'm just going to ask, who authorises the GMP standards?
So it's who authorises it? The Ministry of Health would probably sign off on it, I imagine. But a good manufacturing practice is the process. It's everything from how do you wash your hands, how do you clean.
So there's not one there. One doesn't exist.
Well, no, there is for other industries. So, for example, if you take Augmentin, for example, that would be produced in a facility that met a certain code or quality.
So just to make it clear, we're not looking at the gold standard of something that's set up around the world that Tilray goes to or any of the other organisations do. We would have to set that up.
No. A GMP certification is a certification process that is a globally recognised process.
So there are a range of consultants who come in. It's a bit like ISO standards for organisations. So consultants come in, they set up a complete framework for the business. We approve a whole range of processes that make sure that the way the business manufactures and processes its products are consistent and to a very high standard, and then we must follow those consistently, and then you get recertified regularly. So GMP is globally recognised. For example, I believe all of the milk powder, or certainly the majority of it in New Zealand that has to be exported to other markets, is all produced in a GMP certified facility. So customers...
Somebody must certify it.
So any method that we're using we're not going to use yet, but we're going through the process of doing that now, where we pick a consultant to go provide that service. But there's you go every year, you get audited, and I would assume that would fall under the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
And it would already be an existing system.
Yeah. Indeed. So that outcome that we're advocating for there is to mandate a globally recognised high-end cultivation and manufacturing standards for all products produced and consumed in New Zealand. In our view, that should be GMP certification. And I should add, if the opportunity for export does arise in the future for medicinal cannabis products from New Zealand to the world, products that are GMP certified, of course, will be more readily saleable, we believe, on the world market because of that recognised standard. So we think that'll be important for us. So the second priority is around ensuring product efficacy. So by now, of course, you'll all be well aware of the two main cannabinoids, CBD and THC, that exist in cannabis. Both are extremely therapeutic in supporting a healthy endocannabinoid system, which helps the body maintain homeostasis. Cannabis is, of course, one of the most pharmacologically active plants in the world. THC and CBD are just two of over 80 known cannabinoids in medicinal cannabis, and there are over 300 other compounds such as terpenes in the plant to consider. When we produce whole plant medicines using all these compounds, these products are referred to as full spectrum in the industry. All of the available compounds in medicinal cannabis offer their own therapeutic properties, and together they work synergistically to provide more benefit than any single compound. This is known in the industry as the entourage effect. So the University of Jerusalem's Hadassah Medical School are really one of the world leaders in medicinal cannabis research. A team of scientists there recently sought to compare a medicinal cannabis extract, which was CBD only, with a full spectrum cannabis extract using all compounds. And what they found was that the full spectrum whole plant extract was significantly more efficacious at fighting pain and inflammation than CBD alone. Now, to be clear on that point, CBD is indeed effective in fighting pain and inflammation. We're not saying it isn't, but full spectrum extracts containing the benefits of all the cannabinoids using the entourage effect I mentioned earlier, and terpenes and the like, are superior in many cases and for many treatments. So full spectrum products result in a longer lasting and more therapeutic treatment. And this is very important because it will greatly influence the efficacy of New Zealand-made medicinal cannabis products. So the outcome from this priority that we're advocating for is for full spectrum whole plant medicinal cannabis products to be produced and available in New Zealand.
Just, is the science good enough yet for different indications for different clinicians to prescribe different ratios? You know, for example, is severe epilepsy got a certain ratio that's more beneficial than, say, MS, than, say, pain?
Yeah, I think yes. In
Short answer, yes.
Yeah,
and so there's enough there that you could get some guidance on which...
Absolutely. From markets like North America, Canada, and Germany.
Yeah, we're very, very confident. I mean, they're having thousands of studies done now, particularly on those major ailments which cannabis is very well known to treat chronic pain being a key one, but yes, multiple sclerosis, the effects of radiation therapy from cancer treatments, epilepsy and the like. So there is excellent evidence now for the efficacy of cannabis against those ailments.
And then you'd have the relevant seed stock that you could just ramp up production.
Absolutely.
Of.
So one of the benefits that we have is that we're not starting from scratch here with Helius in New Zealand. We have over decades worth of R&D from the North American market, which of course is at this point far advanced. And so there's been a large body of research done up there. So we have IP for those products and those strains. We'll bring those to New Zealand as soon as our license is issued by MedSafe, and then we'll be prepared to start producing those here in New Zealand.
When you say full spectrum, how will they be quantified? So full spectrum for various strains, will the classification, if you like, still be primarily THC, CBD percentages, and all these various excipients, if you like, that come with this particular product? Or are you going to identify all the cannabinoids, or with a full spectrum, how will you classify it?
Yeah, I think we'd certainly be identifying all the key active compounds in that product, and we would be able to do that by strain and by product. So yes, that's what we would do.
Okay.
And I just wanted to clarify, you've said no restrictions, but what you're talking about is evidence-based THC ratios and specific prescriptions.
Yes,
for specific conditions.
Well, not exactly. I think THC is, of course, certainly one of the key compounds that we wouldn't want to see restrictions placed on. But really what we're saying here is that full spectrum products which use all of the compounds in cannabis are proven to be more therapeutically efficacious. So really we're saying we shouldn't place restrictions around what compounds from cannabis can be used in cannabis-based medicines.
But we have the THC in this bill, and it's 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a deliberate attempt to diminish the psychoactive ingredients.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that. I mean, we think that restriction shouldn't be there. I mean, for starters, THC it actually starts out as THCA, and it becomes THC once it's heated to a particular flashpoint, and when it becomes THC, that's when it becomes psychoactive. So, for example, if we had a product that wasn't a product that was effectively heated in order to be absorbed, so for example, an oil or a caplet or a spray that had THCA in it that wasn't heated, that wouldn't have the psychoactive effects. So, for those reasons, THC, for example, shouldn't be restricted to something as low as 2%.
So in Canada, do they have a range?
Yes, they do, yeah.
The products that are currently coming to New Zealand, Therapeutics, for example, is a 1-to-1 CBD, THC.
Yeah, so half THC, half CBD, instead of it's incredibly effective.
Matt, I'm not sure if Matt can hear me. Is there anything you want to add to that, Matt?
No,
that was pretty on point. What Paul was saying is he's completely correct. It has to be decarboxylated from THCA to THCC in order for the psychoactive ingredients to be a psychoactive product. So, for instance, if you were to use THC with CBD, it's an absolute inhibitor, and it helps derive the CBD product for anti-inflammatory and anti-inhibiting purposes. So, we're dead on with that.
Thank you, Matt. I'm sorry, we didn't get a chance to introduce him at the beginning because we were setting up the tech, but that's Matthew Roden. He is one of the pioneers of the US medicinal cannabis industry. He's been working in the space for 12 years over there and has provided Helius with much of its IP.
Thank you.
Right, so moving on to the third priority is really around accessibility for everybody who can benefit from these products. And I think that the bill intends this, but we really just want to reiterate that medicinal cannabis products are proven to benefit a wide range of patients and ailments. We know this. Healthcare practitioners are indeed best placed to decide whether a person would benefit from medicinal cannabis products. We support that a doctor's letter, possibly a prescription, is appropriate for accessing these products in many cases. We do feel like that it is essential that the government does not legislate who can and cannot benefit from medicinal cannabis products, and this should be a decision for doctors on a patient-by-patient basis. A big part of the reason for this is that with cannabis now legalised in dozens of developed countries, the industry is moving at real pace. And like the wider nutraceutical sector, new products and strains are continually being developed for a range of different ailments. So Helius believes that somebody living with, say, HIV or osteoporosis and certainly chronic pain deserves the same human right to access medicinal cannabis products as somebody suffering from cancer, for example. The most common reason people actually seek out medicinal cannabis and all of the other countries where it is legal around the world is actually for chronic pain. That's because cannabis is extremely effective at treating it. So according to a US report released in January, this year by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, US, there is now conclusive and substantial evidence that cannabis can be an effective treatment for chronic pain. There really isn't any question about that in the research which stands. This is important because we are at risk here of an opioid painkiller epidemic like America is facing right now. We know opioid prescriptions are on the increase here in New Zealand, and deaths locally from opioid abuse actually rose 33% in the last decade that we can access public information around that topic. So this is a significant risk, we think, for New Zealand down the track, and cannabis can play a role in stemming opioid use. The solution really is right in front of us. Data is now confirming that opioid use in the US has actually declined by 20% in the states with legalised medicinal cannabis, where it is accessible to all people whom it benefits. And that's a great outcome for those states.
You've got 2 minutes. So.
Okay. Empower healthcare practitioners to decide who can access medicinal cannabis products. It's imperative we do not restrict access. Moving swiftly. Accountability. All those involved in New Zealand's medicinal cannabis supply chain should be held accountable for the products they develop, distribute and dispense, particularly local licensed producers. So we would encourage you to consider 2 following priority measures. Firstly, to implement an industry-wide seed-to-sale tracking system to ensure complete supply chain monitoring and accountability. Secondly, to install harsh disincentives for licensed medicinal cannabis producers who fail to comply with legislation or responsible business practices. We want you to hold us to the highest possible standards and make us accountable. I'm sure you'll do that anyway, but we really just want to reiterate that point. And finally, our 5th priority is around education. In other developed markets where medicinal cannabis has been legalised, the main barrier to patient access has been due to a lack of product knowledge amongst doctors. And I know this has been a topic through this submission process. In part, this is because doctors seldom prescribe nutraceuticals. Research has shown that whilst doctors are open to cannabis-based medicines in New Zealand, more industry education is needed on the therapeutic functions of cannabis and how to prescribe these products, if in fact that is going to be the way people access them. This education will be essential to support the acceptance and prescription of medicinal cannabis products for patients in New Zealand. So the outcome we would like to see here is that we believe the government should commission a medicinal cannabis training program for healthcare practitioners, and we believe ideally that would be facilitated by the Ministry of Health, and that would make it as credible as possible.
Questions?
No.
No. Just to clarify, the Ministry of MedSafe does administer the GMP certification already in New Zealand.
Let Shane have a question, but yeah.
Can I just continue? Are you contending that you can make pharmaceutical-grade cannabis medicinal products cheaper than what we're getting or what we're sourcing from overseas?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
100%.
Locally produced.
Lower production costs.
Okay. So we already have the IP. We'll have a medical grade facility. We have the financial backing to do it and to move to clinical trials right away. For New Zealand-owned products, be much more cost efficient made here.
Okay.
The critical point is allowing access to people. It's about advertising that cost per dose over a large amount.
Thank you.
All right.
So much.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Kia ora, is this Christopher? Kia ora, Christopher from the New Zealand Hemp Brokers. And are you here with David? Oh, lovely. Please come to the table. So you have 15 minutes.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Active Brick te waka, ko Red Hill te moanga, ko Haureki Golf te moana, ko Captain Thomas Hansen toko tupuna, no Papakura ahau, ko Chris Woodney taku ingoa. I want to take this opportunity to thank the committee for the opportunity to take part in this due process. I got involved in the cannabis industry through family illness, and I've been researching it for about 7 years. I have some light reading material for you. I believe cannabis is the ambulance at the bottom of the pill, and that raw dietary cannabis needs to be introduced into the New Zealand food chain in order to see the better health for all New Zealanders. We get phytocannabinoids from a number of different various plants, and we also get carotenoids, beta-carotene, but In 1998, Donald McIntosh lobbied the government to grow industrial hemp in New Zealand. He saw the value of putting hemp into the food chain as they did thousands and thousands of years ago. It's only since the last 100 years that we've had the THC increased in cannabis. I don't believe that the THC was meant to be increased in cannabis. We are active, fit human beings, and through an active, fit lifestyle, we produce our own endogenous cannabinoids. Hence the reason that hemp has a low THC, high phytonutrient. So yes, medical cannabis is needed at this time because we have people that are very sick from various diseases, which the high cannabinoid content can create apoptosis in cells and help them get through things. In 2015, I applied to the Ministry of Health for an industrial hemp license. And in doing that, I was made to read the industrial hemp regulations. And those regulations state that the onerous restrictions put on marijuana cannabis would not be put on hemp. But that doesn't seem to have been the case over the past 16 years. Since 2008, in 2006, Helen Clark, the Labour leader, went about giving us hemp regulations to regulate the growing and supply of industrial hemp in New Zealand. At the same time, Canada did the same thing. They planted 16,000 hectares that year, and in 2017 they planted 150,000 hectares. New Zealand is lucky to get over 200 hectares. We have a regulation that says we have an enabled industry, and to me and all the others in this industry, we feel that previous governments have not enabled this industry to its full potential. I believe that cannabis needs to be in kindergartens and kohanga rios as a nutrient-dense food source, first and foremost. I think by putting cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, into our diet, into our regular diet, in microdoses, we can change health outcomes in this country. I have done it for many people, as you'll see from my submission. So if you look at the nutrient value of cannabis, we have the seeds that provide us so many beneficial nutrients from it. You've got beta-carotene, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, iron, zinc, vitamins E, C, B1, B3, B6, essential fatty acids, and protein. If we go over to the next page on the first handout I gave you, which gives you the cannabis seed nutrition, you can see how vital this is. This plant was used by people for centuries. Christopher Columbus used to carry this plant seed on his boat in case of a shipwreck. It was one of the only things that could carry or held the essential fatty acids to keep the brain alive. Obviously, the body can feed off the fats that are there, but if you're shipwrecked on an island, you need something to keep the brain alive. Obviously, the brain is what keeps us going. If we flick over to the second page of that, it says how to eat hemp seeds, but then underneath it says leaves and flowers. The leaves and flowers can be eaten as a salad, raw or cooked, juiced or powdered, blended into smoothies. The leaves contain a rich source of fiber, free radical scavenging polyphenols, flavonoids, 9 essential amino acids, as well as minerals, magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, are well studied, especially in popular herbs such as the tea plant. So as we see, yes, I believe that we do need a medical cannabis bill, and it's in my opinion that the bill that has been put forward from the government does not go far enough. The bill allows for people right now to go to the black market and get whole plant cannabis and have a legal defence. When we implement the bill, if it still is the way it is, you're only allowing CBD products with 2% other cannabinoids. That is not what you're allowing people to do right now where they're finding efficacy in whole plant medicine. It's important that we do not take this plant and we dissect it. We need to keep the integrity of the plant as it was intended for human consumption. And that is in a low THC format, high phytonutrient format. If we are, as I said before, if we're living healthy, active lifestyles, the THC we produce through our anandamide helps us regulate our signaling pathways through our brain. So basically, the way that I explain it to people is cannabinoids strengthen neuropathic pathways to allow the brain to operate functionally and regulate homeostasis. Because when we are sick or we're at disease, it's been proven that anandamide production stops or slows down. When you supplement with cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, you can actually bring that level up and allow the immune system to take back control. I've mentioned in my submission mycoplasma. If you go to the page that I've given you that says by Bill Rawls, which is this one here, currently we have a mycoplasma bovis in our cattle. Now I've approached MPI, I've approached Ministry of Health, and I've advised them that we have a number of ways, we have a number of ways to fix this. If you look into the document in front of you, and we flick to, I think it's like page 4, you'll see that the facts of mycoplasma go right through to overcoming chronic mycoplasma infection. The nature of mycoplasma makes it very resistant to conventional therapies. Mycoplasma does not have a cell wall, rendering several classes of antibiotics as completely ineffective. Other classes of antibiotics provide limited benefit in acute infections, but little benefit for chronic systemic infections. The best alternative is supporting the natural healing potential of the body. Artificial created food products, petrochemicals, and other toxins, artificial sources of radiation, and the stress from modern life disrupt the immune function and allow stealth microbes like mycoplasma to flourish. Minimizing these factors is an essential step for controlling the present epidemic of chronic diseases like Lyme, fibromyalgia, fatigue syndromes, and autoimmune diseases. Adequate nutritional support is very important for chronic mycoplasma. Mycoplasma, they're a crazy little beast. I think we're trying to eradicate them. 4,000 of them can fit into one cell. How do we plan to eradicate these things? By killing 22,000 cattle? I don't think that's the way. If we're going to kill 22,000 cattle and then put that into our food chain, is that really the best option for New Zealand? I believe that mycoplasma can become overcome by a healthy diet of hemp, high protein, and cannabinoids. We can supplement cannabinoids through a various range of ways. It scavenges everything it needs. It scavenges your aminos. It scavenges your minerals, which obviously creates fatigue. Okay? So we have something here that's happening in our society throughout the world that really needs to be addressed. And I believe that hemp, industrial hemp in the food chain with microdoses of cannabinoids can help. And in saying that, I got told my sister had 2 weeks to live. What do? Anything you can. Anything you can. So you go to the internet. She was a nurse. I had to study to a point where I could plant seeds with her so she could understand. And now she says she would have used cannabis for the nausea and the pain. I have a man sitting next to me who also didn't have very long to live. And through what I did legally through our industrial hemp regulations, I made industrial hemp products. And those products have helped many, many people. And Dave, I'll let you explain your bit.
Hello. My name's David Bennett, and basically I'm just here in support of Chris, as he was in support of me and not so long ago. I had a fair few things here, but basically the long and short of it is at 15 years old I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Basically from there, over the next kind of well, I mean, it came on very quickly. So went from young and healthy to a lot of intestinal pain and cramps and so on. Ended up having an operation at 15, and in 6 months I'd lost 15 kilos, and basically it was quite a lot of trouble happening. Over the next 20 years there was 3 more major operations and many small ones, a right hemicolectomy, 30 strictureplasties, and 3 areas of my bowel was removed. Basically what that did is it restricted my nutrition intake. In 97, they took me to Auckland under Professor Brian Parry in the intestinal failure service, and I was under his care for many years. Basically, in that time from 97, everything was back to normal and managed to work and bring up family and so on. Then in 2014, everything started to go downhill again with pain, nausea, bleeding, but worst of all, my gut started to, well, actually stopped absorbing nutrition. So at one stage when I ended up in Auckland, I had an area of bowel with a 3 millimetre gap, so I couldn't eat any food at all. The decision was made then to insert what they call a Hickman line into my chest. And from then on, every night I have to hook up to a machine to replace the nutrition that I'd normally get from the food. So TPN, Total Patient Nutrition, they call it. Whilst in Auckland, basically the news was not good from the gastroenterologist. They just didn't think that I could overcome the lack of nutrition with the amount of bowel that was basically left. I had 2 operations in 2014. The first one was unsuccessful, and the second one was really quite bad on my body, not just from the actual operations, but from all the drugs. This was a 2-year process just to be well enough to have an operation. So there was obviously lots of opiate pain relief and so on. After the second operation, towards the end of the year in November, I developed a dependency on opiates. So they made the decision to take me away from the morphine opiate and put me on to methadone. So I left hospital on methadone, which was not part of the plan. Professor Parry was in retiring age, and he personally organised my medical transfer to the Christchurch Hospital under Professor Geary. This was a turning point. When I made it to Christchurch, my body shut down to the point where the doctors couldn't even insert a line in my vein, and my heart rate kept dropping to the point where I was basically put into a low-induced coma, and I was in intensive care for a week. I had smoked cannabis to help with pain and nausea and sleep for years. But with so much new information around on cannabis and uses for Crohn's, I asked Chris to help me out. I knew that he had a lot of knowledge and been researching it since kind of late 2010. One stipulation that I had for him was that I didn't want to be stoned anymore. I didn't want to smoke weed and be stoned because I got 2 young kids, but also I got to work. You can't. For me personally, I just needed help, but not the stone. So I discussed the cannabis use with Professor Geary. My pain team and the hospital dietitian all were in support, but felt that their hands were tied, and even if they could give me the prescription, as I hadn't worked for 3 years, there was no way I could afford it. Chris made me some whole plant capsules and balms for the aches. Upon receiving these and discharged from Auckland Hospital, I went home. I was 52 kilos. Within a month of starting on the capsules, I started to feel things were happening. Chris explained to me how whole plant cannabis helps the pathways for the brain to rejuvenate that body balance. I figured there was no point carrying on this way with all these other drugs in my system. My daily intake was methadone, morphine, codeine, cyclazine, gabapentin, infliximab, methotrexate, omeprazole, and another of others. We did research and talked to doctors about stopping taking these. My GP actually suggested I not try and get off methadone because my body was under so much stress at the time. I made a plan and got stuck into it. What I went through for the next year was a real wake-up of what opiates can do to a body. At least 5 times in that year I was admitted in hospital and by myself. And if I go to hospital, I really need to be there because I don't like the place. Dehydration was a big problem from all the vomiting and what they call bone crawl, which is just a feeling I can't explain. It feels like your body's under attack. I also started to put on weight, have more energy, and my mind was becoming clearer. Chris had also developed more supplements specifically for my needs, whole plant capsules, whole plant oil, and more balms. For nausea and sleep, I would continue to smoke cannabis, as this is what was working for me in the past. We had started off with very small doses, and my body was under so much strain. Chris's plan was to start slow and work my way into it. As the body allowed, I pushed myself to reduce on the methadone, sometimes too far and ending up back in hospital. But while there, I got really good support from the medical staff around me. As I could see, I was dropping so fast on all these opiates and different pain relief and things that I just didn't feel I needed and could substitute with this. Basically, in October, from there to October, I put on 17 kilos. Started work in October and in on-water construction. From a discharge, I've put on 18 kilos. The dietitian in Christchurch Hospital can't believe the difference. And bearing in mind that my total nutritional intake is a script, it's regulated, so they know exactly what's going into my body. The only other thing I was taking was the products that I was getting from Chris.
David, I don't really want to interrupt, but you do have a couple of minutes. Now, you can use them. We're happy to listen to you, but then there won't be any time.
Yeah. So basically, the points that I've got are that prescription needs to be regulated so that patients like myself know exactly what we're getting, and you're getting the same thing every time. The regulation also with high-quality cannabis, all of the same makeup. And under prescription to eliminate the stress and pressure of through sourcing for the supplements. That's basically more.
And through my endeavours and through starting up New Zealand hemp brokers and trying to push the New Zealand hemp industry, I've managed to acquire a partner in Canada in Innovate Phytoceuticals with some of the head scientists over there that look after the regulatory framework in Canada. My company plans to provide New Zealand children under the age of 15 free at-cost medical cannabis products. We don't believe that children should have to pay, and families that are already struggling have to have more financial burden put on them. We're prepared to donate those products to a charity and gift those to children under the age of 15. This plant belongs to the people. The people know more about this plant than the professionals because they've used it so long under the guise of the law that they haven't believed in. There's a big community of people out there that are in support of medical cannabis. Everybody you talk to, they say, we need medical cannabis. But I don't want you to dissect this plant. Please don't pull it apart. Whole plant cannabis is where it's at. A couple of drops of this a day, which won't get you high, won't get you stoned, just simply allows your brain to take back control of your body. And that's what we're doing. We're fueling the mind. Too often we fuel our bodies, and we get we're fueling the wrong thing. These cannabinoids that are found in plants are vital to human health. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Is that product, you sell it here in New Zealand?
The product is a legal product of industrial hemp. I've had notification from the Ministry of Health that my initiatives have not been thought of when they wrote the Misuse of Drugs Act. I've designed a flower as in FLOUR, that I add to hemp seed oil, and the customer buys that and they use that. It's simply it. There's no infusion, no extraction, no laws broken, 100% legal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is Billy here, please, from Greencross, New Zealand? And Billy, you're here with Rosie. Please come to the front of our... Hey Billy, you've seen how we run. You do have 15 minutes. I've been a bit lax this afternoon, but thank you very much for making the effort to make a submission.
Right, hi. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Billy McKee. I've been a director for Greencross New Zealand for over 20 years. This is Rosie Purchase. She's a lawyer and also a Greencross member. Greencross is a medical support group for cannabis users. There is over 5,000 members. Most members are long-term sufferers who have already tried pharmaceutical drugs extensively and have suffered addictions and other serious quality of life reducing conditions. They're using cannabis where they can. Supply is a huge problem. They have reduced or quit pharmaceutical drugs and have an improved quality of life. Supply is a huge problem. People are suffering, dying daily from a lack of supply, and people will continue to grow and save themselves and their loved ones. What we want. Well, we've handed out a copy of our written submissions, presentation, and that's got quite a lot of I hope you're going to read it, especially at the end of it. So about a licensing system that we think that will solve pretty much all of the problems. But anyway, this is what we want from Greencross. We want medical cannabis patients to be exempted from prosecution and a moratorium imposed until laws are sorted out to comply with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the Bill of Rights Act, and the New Zealand Law Commission recommendations on 2010. We want an extension from eligibility from 1 year terminal to patients with informed consent forms.
What Billy means by that is, as the GPs recommended in their submissions, there are two types of medicine. There's the strict gold standard pharmaceutical MedSafe approved standard, and there's complementary and alternative medicines. What we're focusing on is the complementary and alternative medicine style as recommended by the GP, and the new bill, which is drafted in our submission at page 13, page 6 rather, focuses on that, and it follows the American system in a way that with an informed consent where the doctor doesn't necessarily have to agree with the particular choice the patient makes, but as long as he's satisfied that they have informed consent, i.e. they're fully informed of the risks and the benefits and the alternatives and have made their choice, then he can sign off on the form. And we suggest that that is the form that is used to allow all patients who have this form to be immune from any form of criminal prosecution.
Okay. Our next request is, I understand the bill exemption proposed was for smoking only. So could that exemption be expanded to include oils, ointments, tinctures, edibles, juice extracts, and the raw plant?
The actual delivery is not specified.
What's that?
The actual delivery mechanism, whether it's smoking or tincture or whatever it is not specified. It's
Okay,
just the use.
just scratch that one then.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely.
So we've done that, just like that.
Yeah, all done already. Right. Okay, we request an inclusion for a grow your own model. People are growing their own anyway, and a lot of harm is being done by the criminalisation of their medicine. So some sort of model where we can grow our own.
And in that respect, our draft bill elaborates on what the government bill already says, and we ask for licensing not only just for GMP standards, but to allow licensing for growing your own, licensing for we've also asked for cannabis social clubs, because we consider that with a lot of these, the Greencross members, their depression is accompanied by isolation, and a lot of the sick people are isolated. They spend a lot of their time on Facebook because it's company. If they could have cannabis social clubs, then they would have a place to go. They would also have, that cannabis social club would have a proper grower, and it would allow people who get the informed consent, have the informed consent form signed by their doctor, when they nominate a grower. They may not have a grower that they can nominate, but they can come to a cannabis social club and have their medical needs met there and social needs met there.
Okay. The next one. We also request the right to use, possess and sell hemp flower oil as the product is defined under the hemp regulations.
Seems that it is being sold.
What's that?
Yeah, from what Christopher told us.
Oh, it is? Yeah, but just as a hemp
It's
flower.
not really actually.
It's not sold with the authority. The Ministry of Health opinion does not approve of that oil. However, the legislation allows me to do it.
Hasn't excluded it.
What happens is, under the hemp regulations, you've got hemp products, which are anything derived from hemp, which has a 0.5% maximum THC level. There is nothing in the hemp regulations that stop hemp farmers from providing products that, like Chris is providing, apart from the Ministry of Health, who say, and I quote, "We do not approve of hemp products containing appreciable levels of cannabinoids." There is no legal justification for that. The Ministry of Health admit themselves there is no legal justification for that, and yet they will not allow it. One of their arguments has been, we don't allow it because it was never the intention of Parliament. In fact, as Chris has mentioned already, Mr McIntosh began the lobbying for the hemp industry on that basis because his wife was actually sick at the time. Secondly, in the 2006 press release of the hemp regulations, MedSafe announces it, which is the medicines arm of the Ministry of Health, but on top of that they call it hemp is a Class B1 drug. Why Class B1 drug requires extraction, and they justify it that CBD is an isomer of THC. Now, there's arguments against that, but just the sheer fact that they have called it a Class B1 drug instead of a Class C drug, cannabis, anticipates that they did expect extractions of cannabinoids. So we would like it absolutely made clear that the hemp regulations are perfectly sufficient for providing safe hemp products with the low THC levels. But just as an aside, because hemp is already licensed, able to be licensed under the hemp regulations, what we also would ask the committee to consider is to raise the level of THC from the current level, 0.5%, to up to 2%. That is not a high level of THC, and with an equivalent level of CBD, there's going to be no risk of psychoactive effects. But what it will do is greatly enhance the amount of products that the hemp farmers can make, and greatly enhance the health benefits for humans in New Zealand.
Good. Next, we request a recommendation from this committee to Parliament for the introduction of a drug licensing system. So we've written one out, a draft one, and it's on page 16 there. We'd have a read of. So this would be similar to a driver's license for education and a subway card, and eventually would cover all drugs and herbs, including alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical drugs. This licensing system would take us from having one of the worst, most harmful drug laws in the world to a civilised system that has the most harm-reducing effect in the world.
questions?
In our submission, we've also just, because I spoke earlier on personal submission, I think you've received that, it's called supplementary submission, Rosemary Purchase.
Yeah.
A question was asked by, I think, Dr. Craig about the developing brain and adolescence. Well, I went home and I did some further research on that. You asked me what jurisdictions, and I said, how did jurisdictions deal with that overseas? And I said to you, they just use age. Well, strangely enough, that very day I received an email with the latest reports on that very subject, and I've actually listed them for you to read. But the other thing that I wanted to also mention as part of the mop-up is in those earlier submissions I addressed what I would consider the slightly inappropriate and misleading and in some case incorrect studies that the Medical Association relied on, but also the College of Psychiatrists. They talk about there being insubstantial evidence for CBD for the treatment of mental health issues. And again, in our Greencross, the solution, there's a bit of a mop-up there with many studies, including from the Lancet, the Cochrane report, the gold standard of studies that the medical profession rely on, saying that in fact it does have enormous benefits to anxiety, PTSD, SAD, depression, and they're all listed in there. So that's just a question.
Oh, I was just going to say my copy doesn't have that. The page 16 onward, page 16 licensing. I don't have that, so if I could.
And mine doesn't either, actually. It stops it.
Beg your pardon, you'll just have to go. I had this, it was a PDF, the licensing system, and so I had to add it when I got it printed, and it didn't print the pages. So if you look at page 15, it's the one after that.
I go up to 13.
Oh, well, it's 3 pages. Sorry, the ECS was a PDF as well.
Very sorry to interrupt you.
So just, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Hey, is this a good time? Has anyone got any questions? No?
Billy is a really good person to ask questions of if you want to know. He's had 25 years of experience looking after people who have been very, very sick and seeing the differences between...
We've had quite a few testimonials. I mean, you don't have to convince us about, I guess, people's experiences of the cannabis that they're using. We've had so many. Have you got...
I've got a very basic question, and I apologise for my ignorance. What is the flower or fruit of cannabis? Cannabinoids? You keep talking about...
The flower is an unseeded head on the cannabis plant. So the pistil, there's a bract. I can show you.
The flower is
Let's have one here.
It's the flower of the cannabis seed.
So the flower, so inside these little bract here, are seeds. So you can see them, there's seeds inside. This is industrial hemp. If this was a flower, there would be a pistil.
Did you declare that for security?
Yes, and I have a license to possess
that's
this.
okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
So the pistil comes out of the bract, and that's the flower.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
And when the flower touches pollen, it goes into, so the plant goes from cannabinoid production, which produces your high THC.
Yes.
When pollen touches that pistil, it goes to seed production.
Right.
So then it goes from a flower to what this is, which is a seed head.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate your time.
The airport tomorrow.
Now, do we have Robin here from Biotrace Limited? Kia ora, Robin. Welcome to the Health Select Committee. We have your submission in front of us, and you have 15 minutes. And obviously, it's your time, but if you want us to engage with you, leave a bit of time for questions.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
hope that I won't need all that time. From my submission, you'll see that I'm an importer and distributor of natural health products, and we also run our own natural health clinics. And I employ a number of naturopaths, and we go for training to the US every year. And we've, over the last few years, experienced American practitioners using cannabinoids and at various levels, that including THC. I was, as I've mentioned, that 20 years ago I broke my back and my spine is fused, and although that operation was pretty successful, I'm left with residual pain, which is mostly mild, but can get pretty severe. And I've been forced to use pharmaceuticals in that time, and they don't make me feel very well. My system is pretty sensitive. In fact, it's sensitive because I was sprayed with Agent Orange 40 years ago, and I've had this chemical sensitivity since before that time. So about 3 years ago, at one of these conferences, I was given some low THC CBDs, both in a cream and oral form, and I miraculously had no pain for the period that I was able to have access to these. I wasn't prepared to risk coming back through customs with the products, so I left them behind, unfortunately. But when I go to the States now, then I make sure I at least have a week or so free of pain. In our clinics, we see a tremendous number of people with pain, from arthritis, from digestive tract issues, Crohn's disease, and goodness knows what. A great number of these people have been through the medical system, the allopathic medical system, and they're looking for something else because of the bad experiences they're having, and using natural health approaches, we're able to provide these people with quite a lot of relief and success, because they're having to pay for us, and there's no free seeing a natural health practitioner. So if they weren't experiencing relief, they wouldn't come back. They certainly wouldn't pay us. We could make great strides if we could get access to what is a demonstrably safe product. Demonstrably safe, and I think if you and perhaps you've been told this already, people are talking about there is no science behind cannabis. But if you search Google Scholar, there are 89,000 prints available. Not all of them are complementary, but then most studies that are produced have flaws or have problems with them. So, but an enormous number of them are very, very positive. If you look at PubMed, you can see more than 15,000 papers discussing the benefits of cannabinoids. So there is a huge amount of science that's available around it. And as you've just said, that you've had a tremendous number of submissions from individuals who have talked about the benefits of it. I rather naively thought that that the health department would enable me to get a controlled drugs license and import product from proven suppliers who are GMP certified, good manufacturing practice certified, and GMP is a part of the manufacturing industry for nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals in New Zealand today. The standard's already set. There's nothing new in that. So the suppliers are GMP certified. They have years and years of experience with extracting and developing and producing product that can be brought to New Zealand really quickly and brought to market really quickly without years and years of research and development with manufacturing systems and refinements. So from my perspective as a natural health practitioner, we would benefit greatly from being able to provide this to our clients and patients. And there is such a market gap out there.
So you're saying that we should be looking at an importer's license so that people like you can just bring over to New Zealand what's already been used?
What's already been used has got a proven market share.
Yeah.
One of the suppliers that I can have access to is actually paying a tremendous amount of money to get research done in both South America and in Europe.
And why have they said you can't bring those products in? Because of the composition? Too much. Why have they said you can't bring those products in? Because of the composition? Too much CBD?
No, the health department won't let me bring it in because it's a controlled drug. And
but what qualifies it? Is it about the level of CBD or THC? Because the amended section 14, that may be manufactured, imported or supplied. So there will be scope under what we're attempting to do for people to be able to eventually.
Is it because it's not pharmaceutical grade? Probably.
That's almost like de-separating the whole plant and putting it back together.
Okay.
Almost impossible.
So the definition that we are using would mean that overseas products that are being used successfully there would not fit.
Not qualify.
Based on one product, epidiolecs. That's what we've done. Based that whole installation on was epidiolecs.
Okay.
Because overseas it's 5% in some jurisdictions, isn't it?
Yeah, overseas they have whole plant as well. Whole plant.
Where does the psychoactive component come in? At what proportion?
So when the THC, which is a psychoactive component of it, is a valuable part of the pain product, but not a vital part. So the higher levels of pain do need the cofactor of THC, but for the great majority of people who have some sort of arthritic condition or are experiencing Crohn's disease, which hasn't proceeded to the stage where the previous person was talking about, there is great relief available with just plain CBDs. But the health department were in no way interested in discussing with me. Their answer was CBDs and marijuana plants are not allowed to be exported by any country. So I then couldn't get it in. And if I did get it in, because it's a controlled drug, I couldn't market it. So I couldn't send out emails, and I couldn't talk to anybody. When I said I could go and talk to the medical practitioners, they said, well, that's marketing. So no matter what I said or what I tried to do with the health department, their answer was, no, you can't do this. It's a controlled drug and you can't get it. So any law, any adjustment that you make to the bill, I hope you take into account the people who are going to administer it, who really are not supportive of this.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think without any doubt, the safety of it is clearly established. In fact, I'd like to provide for you copies of just the abstract from a World Health Organization bill published on the 6th to 10th of November 27, and within it, in the abstract, they say CBD is generally well tolerated with a good safety profile. Reported adverse effects may be as a result of drug interactions between CBD and patients' existing medications. But it talks about how safe the products are, and I provide this for you.
Thank you.
And that report's freely available online.
As you can see, we've got lots of information about the efficacy of the products. No, we can't actually hear from other people because this is Robin's time. I appreciate you want to help, but thank you.
This is the letter that highlights the difference between a whole plant and a CBD isolate. In the back of my submission, that 100 milligrams of CBD does nothing, where a drop of whole plant does everything.
It wouldn't be my experience with pain, but if I may continue.
Yes, we have 4 more minutes. Thank you.
I've just had a minor amendment. A minor amendment to my submission.
You can just talk it through, and we can all mark it on our.
Okay, and on it, I've put on the back that the Mayo Clinic suggests CBD doses on scientific research. So, as a natural health practitioner, I would be very happy if we could get a CBD product with 50 milligrams of active CBD product and with a small amount of THC as a cofactor. I totally agree with earlier conversations that we get the whole plant. That would be wonderful. But having dealt with the New Zealand Health Department, I'm kind of a bit cynical or conservative about being able to get a THC product. But I think it's very hard for anyone with an open mind and thinking about it that we can't get a CBD product onto the market pretty quickly. Here we are.
There you are. Thank you. Any questions? No. Thank you so much. Good.
Thank you.
So our last submission of the day is that Jonathan Rennie.
Yes, sir, I am.
Kia ora, Jonathan. It's Lewis Sewell speaking. I'm the chair of the Health Select Committee. You will have 15 minutes to make your submission, and before then, I'd just like to enable my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thank you.
Dr. Shane Reddy, National MP, Whangarei.
Nikki Wagner, National MP from Christchurch.
Matt Ducey, National MP, Makariri.
Angie Warren Clark, Labour-list MP based in the Bay of Plenty.
Liz Craig, Labour-list MP based in Invercargill.
So over to you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'd like to begin by just saying that we do support in principle the general aim of this bill, of course, to make medical cannabis available to those who need it. So the hemp store has been running as a business for 21 odd years, and we've always taken an interest in cannabis law reform, and not only because it would make it easier for there to be a hemp industry, but for matters of human rights, economics and such. And a big part of this is, of course, medical cannabis. So we've made sure we've kept abreast of this issue for a long time now. Hence, we believe we have some expertise to offer. Can I just ask, am I coming through okay?
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Good. So I'll just open by going over, quickly repeating our general recommendations, which were from paragraph 19, page 7 of our submission, to expand the scope of this bill to make medicinal cannabis legal and available to maximum benefit for all patients who gain relief from it, gain relief from it, and their caregivers, regardless of the severity of illness. And of course, we have several specific recommendations about this. And secondly, consider the substantial potential socio-economic benefits of a local medicinal cannabis industry and make provisions for this industry to be established. And thirdly, this is pretty important, and I realise this has become more and more important to me as I've looked at the other submissions, make provisions for a large-scale education drive for doctors and other health practitioners to bring them up to date with knowledge on the use of medicinal cannabis. And also we say that in support of this process, we invite the Health Select Committee to utilise the Hemp Store's expertise and come back to us with questions whenever you need to. So I guess one of the most important things that we have to offer is experience of customers coming into the hemp store. They know it's obviously a cannabis-friendly environment. It's called the hemp store, and hemp is a kind of cannabis. And so a lot of people gravitate to us for help, advice, and things like that. And as I pointed out in the submission, what we have is customers who are also patients looking for some kind of help. And we listed 9 kinds of customers that we get, such as people looking for CBD, or people who are using cannabis and who are desperate and thought that maybe we'd be able to provide it, or people who just want information about getting a prescription, so on and so forth. And this is happening with growing frequency as there becomes more awareness about medical cannabis in the community. And every time we have to disappoint people. This is and this is becoming increasingly stressful for us and kind of heartbreaking because sometimes people stand in front of us telling heartbreaking stories about their illness and how they're having to go illegal, go illicit for the only medicine that works for them. Well, obviously we can't help them, and unfortunately the information we have to give to people is quite demoralising. They might have to go through a difficult prescription process for very expensive meds that might yet be hard to get. Even with non-psychoactive CBD, it's all very expensive. So we come here today saying that the bill before the House, doesn't go far enough because there's far more than just people who are terminally ill who are affected, and there really has to be, quite a big leap to actually give the help that's needed. And what we just want to report to you that we can see there's a lot of help that's needed, because not a day goes by without someone coming in making a medical cannabis inquiry of some sort, and frequently they're people who are in a lot of pain or who have a very difficult illness. And frequently they are people who have already discovered that cannabis is the only thing that really works for them. So that's where we're coming from. Now, one of the things that I think is really important to address is that there's been a bit of a false equivalency made by the medical establishment between whole herb cannabis medicines and sort of novel pharmaceuticals, and that there's this expectation, for these gold standard clinical trials, etc., which are necessary for industry, pharmaceutical industry. They should need to jump through some hoops before they bring a new drug, to the community. But cannabis is not a new drug. It's been used for thousands of years, and it's not a novel. They're not novel compounds. They're compounds which we've known about for a long time, and which we know work very well with the human body. And so therefore it's not the same thing, and that's why we're pushing for for the establishment of a new standard of medicine that's a natural whole herb medicine that has a tradition of use. So it has a known, at least anecdotal efficacy. And the point about that is that it would be still something similar to food grade, I guess. So it would still be regulated. It would still be under constraints to make sure that it's consistent and safe and healthy. Like I say, something maybe similar to food grade, but with nowhere near the same pressure as put on people developing a new drug. And that would greatly bring down the cost. And that's one of our biggest problems, is these things, all these things that have been developed, by pharmaceutical companies like Therapeutics, they're just enormously expensive. And it's important to bring down that cost, and it's important to make way in this way, because it would also, of course, have the follow-on effect of enabling, making it much easier for us to have a local industry in growing cannabis for medicines, which could be of great benefit. And as other submitters have pointed out, we could redirect the illicit skills of people who have been growing for recreational cannabis towards something that's good for the community and healthy for society, and good for the economy. Now, with regard to having natural medicine having its own category, we still think that this would be prescribed medicine. Potent cannabis products would still be prescribed, but there might be a provision for weaker products to be over the counter, and all of this would be controlled by still needing to go through a doctor, so that we agree with previous submitters that some sort of certification for people that can benefit from cannabis that has involved a doctor would be the best way to control this. And we hope that you will consider this. We hope that you'll consider something that goes a bit further along these lines. And we also note that there does seem to be a bit of a systemic bias in the medical science establishment against cannabis, and they often, people such as the pharmacological guys will often sit there and seem very rational and objective when they're saying, oh no, it's all very scary, but they're actually not. They're not being very rational and objective, because it's not as though this drug is a new thing. And it's funny to think that in 1935, when the Marijuana Tax Act was being passed by the U.S. federal government to completely prohibit cannabis, the main block that they came across was the American Medical Association. It was the doctors of the time saying, please don't take this medicine away from us. You pass this law and we'll lose a very valuable medicine. I think it's a shame that modern doctors have forgotten that there is actually a long tradition in the West of using cannabis medicines. And therefore, and I think their forgetfulness is actually got to remember that in the last 75 years under Prohibition, there's been, a very strong negative bias introduced to the medical sciences against cannabis because of state-run prohibition, and that's very oppressive. People have to, in order to get research grants, they have to make sure they word them in a way that they're finding the harms of cannabis, not the benefits. Things like that 75 years of that. And I think that to a certain degree, the medical establishment suffering from a little bit of trauma from the oppression of prohibition, and they're not thinking very clearly on this. And that's why doctor education is really important, and fortunately overseas knowledge and experience can come to our rescue on this. In the meantime, as the Drug Foundation said, we need to centre patients' voices, because these people are not lying. These people are seriously finding cannabis helps for their medical needs, and that is our balance against a doctor's and medical researchers' bias that is built up under 75 years of oppressive prohibition.
Thank you, Jonathan. We've probably got just a minute for some concluding comments. I've looked around. There are no questions for you. So.
I suppose the most important thing. Is to remember that the point I'd like to most drive home is that we can treat natural whole herb medicines differently from novel pharmaceutical companies, novel pharmaceutical drugs. There is a qualitative and quantitative difference, and that we need to seriously look at that to enable provision of medical cannabis for users to go ahead, medical users to go ahead, and for it to be low cost. I guess that's the number one take home. And I hope that this was helpful for you.
Thank you. Appreciated that very much. Thank you for taking the time to make a submission.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.